The first gunshot stole the breath from Adelaide Vargas's lungs before she even heard it. One moment she was clutching her meager belongings on the westbound stagecoach, and the next she was diving for cover as masked bandits surrounded them on the lonely stretch of Nebraska Territory road. It was May of 1871, and Adelaide was 23 years old, alone. And now, as the coach driver slumped dead from his perch utterly without protection in a lawless land. 2 days later, her body ached as she curled beneath the wooden bridge spanning Scottsbluff Creek, the only shelter she'd found after fleeing into the wilderness. The cool spring air bit through her torn dress as darkness fell over the Nebraska plains. She hadn't eaten since escaping the robbery, and her eyelids grew heavy despite her fear. Sleep came in fitful waves, the sound of water flowing beneath her a cruel reminder of her parched throat. Adelaide didn't hear the approaching footsteps until they were almost upon her. A tall shadow loomed at the edge of the bridge, her heart hammered as she pressed herself against the muddy embankment. "Hello there," a deep voice called. "I can see you, madam, don't be afraid." The man crouched down, his silhouette framed by the fading twilight. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, and she could make out the outline of a holstered pistol at his side. "I mean you no harm," he said, gentler now. "Are you hurt?" Adelaide's voice cracked when she tried to answer. She hadn't spoken in days. "They took everything," she managed. The stranger nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "Stagecoach robbery 3 days back," she nodded, surprised. "Word travels. They hit the overland coach from Omaha." He studied her for a long moment. "You can't stay here. Night gets mighty cold and there's wolves that come down to the creek." Adelaide wrapped her arms tighter around herself, eyes darting from the man to the darkening prairie beyond. She had nowhere to go. The cowboy seemed to read her thoughts. He removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. Even in the dim light, his eyes were kind. "There's a fire waiting at my place," he said simply. "Hot food, too. My ranch is just over that rise." He gestured to the north. "You're welcome to it, no strings attached. Come morning, I can take you to town if that's what you want." Adelaide hesitated, weighing her options, which were, in truth, no options at all. Stay and face the elements or trust this stranger. "I'm Matthew Forrester," he added, as if offering his name might ease her fears. "Most folks call me Matt." "Adelaide," she whispered. "Adelaide Vargas." He nodded, then slowly extended his hand. "Well, Miss Vargas, what'll it be?" "That bridge won't keep you warm tonight." With trembling fingers, Adelaide reached out and took his calloused hand. Matthew's ranch was modest but sturdy, a log cabin with a stone chimney that sent smoke curling into the night sky. A small barn stood nearby, and a corral held 3 horses that lifted their heads at their approach. He'd set her on his horse for the ride, walking alongside and leading the animal with gentle words. As promised, a fire burned in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across rough-hewn furniture. The warmth hit Adelaide like an embrace. "Sit," Matthew said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "I'll fetch you some water and stew." Adelaide sank into the seat, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The cabin was tidy, if sparse, a table with 2 chairs, a bed in the corner with a patchwork quilt, shelves lined with a few books and cooking supplies. A rifle hung above the door. Matthew returned with a cup of water, which she drank too quickly, coughing as it went down. "Easy," he cautioned. "Small sips." While she drank, he ladled stew from a pot hanging by the fire into a bowl. The smell made her stomach contract painfully. "It's not fancy," he apologized, setting the bowl before her with a chunk of bread. "Bachelor cooking." Adelaide didn't care. She ate with such desperate hunger that she barely tasted it, though it was rich with venison and vegetables. Matthew sat across from her, patient and quiet, occasionally tending the fire. When she finally slowed, embarrassment warmed her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I haven't eaten in days." "No need for sorry," he replied. "Been there myself once or twice." She studied him properly now. He was perhaps 30, with a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. His clothes were worn but clean, a faded blue shirt, canvas pants, and scuffed boots. No wedding ring. Why help me? She asked bluntly. Matthew considered this, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Out here, folks help each other or they don't survive. Simple as that. He paused. Where were you headed before the robbery? Adelaide stared into her empty bowl. Scottsbluff, my cousin lives there. I was coming to work in her dress shop. Amelia Vargas, Matthew asked, eyebrows raised. You know her, small town, he explained. Everyone knows everyone. Her shop's doing well. She makes the finest dresses this side of Omaha. Relief washed over Adelaide. At least her cousin was real and her shop successful. The letters they'd exchanged over the past year had given her hope enough to leave Philadelphia after her parents died of influenza, selling everything to buy the stagecoach ticket west. I lost everything, she said quietly. The money my parents left me, my clothes, even the address where I was to find her. Matthew nodded, understanding in his eyes. We'll find her tomorrow. Scottsbluff's not so big you can get lost in it. He stood, stretching. You take the bed tonight, I'll bunk by the fire. Adelaide started to protest, but he held up a hand. My mother would haunt me if I let a lady sleep on the floor, he said with a small smile. There's a wash basin behind that screen if you want to clean up. I've got a spare shirt you can use as a nightdress. Before she could thank him, he was outside, giving her privacy. Adelaide found the wash basin and scrubbed days of dirt from her skin with the cold water. The borrowed shirt hung to her knees, smelling of sunshine and sage. When Matthew returned, he carried extra blankets. He made a pallet near the hearth without comment, his movements efficient. Mr. Forrester, Adelaide said as he settled onto his makeshift bed. Thank you. In the firelight, his smile was gentle. Get some rest, Miss Vargas, tomorrow will be better. When Adelaide woke, sunlight streamed through the cabin's small window. For a moment, confusion seized her. The unfamiliar bed, the smell of coffee and bacon, the sound of someone moving quietly nearby. Memory returned in a rush. The stagecoach, the robbery, the bridge, the cowboy with kind eyes. She sat up to find Matthew at the cookstove, his back to her. He wore a fresh shirt, his hair damp from washing. Morning, he said without turning. Hope you're hungry. Adelaide slipped behind the screen to change back into her torn dress, smoothing it as best she could. When she emerged, Matthew had set 2 plates on the table. I reckon we should get you to your cousin's as soon as possible, he said, passing her a cup of strong coffee. She'll be worried if she was expecting you days ago. Adelaide nodded, the weight of her situation settling back onto her shoulders. She doesn't know exactly when I was coming. I sent a letter, but... She trailed off. No matter, we'll find her. He ate quickly, efficiently, a man accustomed to wasting no time on meals. Adelaide found her appetite had returned, and she made short work of the eggs and bacon. Outside, the morning was clear and cool, the vast prairie stretching to meet a crisp blue sky. Matthew saddled 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and a smaller mare with a white blaze. Can you ride? He asked, adjusting the stirrups on the mare. A little, Adelaide admitted. It's been years. Daisy here is gentle as they come, he assured her, helping her mount. The ride to Scottsbluff took just under an hour. Adelaide marveled at the landscape so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. Here, space seemed endless, the horizon a distant promise. Occasionally, Matthew would point out landmarks or name plants and animals they passed. As they approached town, buildings appeared, first scattered homesteads, then more clustered structures of wood and brick. Scottsbluff was larger than Adelaide had imagined, with a proper main street lined with businesses. Town's grown fast, Matthew explained. The railroad's coming next year. Folks are settling in advance. People nodded, greeting to Matthew as they rode down the main street. A few cast curious glances at Adelaide in her disheveled dress. Vargas' dress shop should be just ahead, Matthew said, pointing to a storefront with a painted sign showing scissors and thread. Your cousin has a good eye for location, right in the heart of things. They dismounted and Matthew tied the horses to a hitching post. Adelaide suddenly felt nervous. What if Amelia didn't want her after all? What if the letters had been mere politeness? Before she could voice these fears, the shop door opened and a woman stepped out, dark-haired and petite, her dress immaculately tailored. She squinted at them, then her eyes widened. Adelaide Vargas, is that you?" Amelia, relief flooded through Adelaide. Her cousin rushed forward, embracing her tightly, then holding her at arm's length to examine her. "My God, what happened to you? I've been worried sick. The stagecoach arrived days ago and you weren't on it, and then we heard about the robbery," she broke off, noticing Matthew. "Mr. Forrester." "Miss Vargas," he tipped his hat. "You know each other?" Adelaide asked. "Mr. Forrester brings the finest wool from his sheep to sell to me," Amelia explained. "But how do you?" Understanding dawned on her face. "Did you help my cousin?" Matthew shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "Found her by Scottsbluff Creek. She needed a place to rest." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Then I am forever in your debt, sir." She turned back to Adelaide. "Come inside immediately. You need proper clothes and rest," and she stopped, looking again at Matthew. "Will you join us for tea, Mr. Forrester? The least I can do is offer refreshment." "Kind of you, madam, but I've errands to run," he replied. His eyes met Adelaide's. "Glad you found your family, Miss Vargas." Adelaide stepped toward him. "How can I repay you?" A small smile touched his lips. "No payment needed, just doing what anyone would." "Not anyone," she said softly. He nodded once, then mounted his horse. "Good day, ladies." As he rode away, Amelia looped her arm through Adelaide's. "You must tell me everything," she insisted, leading her into the shop. "But first, let's get you proper clothes and food." The dress shop was elegant, with bolts of fabric lining the walls and half-finished garments displayed on forms. A bell tinkled as they entered, and two young women looked up from their sewing. "Girls, this is my cousin Adelaide from Philadelphia," Amelia announced. "She'll be joining us. Adelaide, this is Ruth and Mary, my assistants." The girls curtsied, eyeing Adelaide's torn dress with interest. "She was in that dreadful stagecoach robbery," Amelia explained. "Lost everything." "How awful!" Mary exclaimed. "Were you hurt, miss?" Ruth asked. "Just frightened," Adelaide assured them, "and fortunate to have found help." Amelia ushered her through the shop to a door at the back, which opened onto a comfortable apartment, a sitting room with 2 bedrooms beyond. "This is home," she said. "You'll stay with me, of course. I've been so excited since your letter saying you'd come." Adelaide felt tears threatening. After days of fear and uncertainty, the kindness overwhelmed her. "Thank you, Amelia. I don't know what I would have done if Mr. Forrester hadn't found you," Amelia finished, her expression thoughtful. "He's a good man, keeps to himself mostly, but honest as the day is long. His ranch is small but well run." She paused. "And he's unmarried." "Amelia," Adelaide protested, heat rising in her cheeks. Her cousin laughed. "Just an observation. Now let's find you something decent to wear. You're taller than me, but I have a dress we can let out." Within an hour, Adelaide was transformed, bathed, dressed in a simple blue frock Amelia had quickly altered, and settled at the kitchen table with a proper meal. As she ate, she recounted the robbery, her flight into the wilderness, and her rescue. "You're lucky it was Matthew Forrester who found you," Amelia said soberly. "There are men in these parts who—" She didn't finish the thought. "But that's behind you now. You're safe and you can start your new life here." "I've lost everything I brought," Adelaide reminded her. "The money, my clothes, even my sewing notions." "Nonsense," Amelia waved dismissively. "You have your skill with a needle. You wrote that you were the finest seamstress in your shop in Philadelphia, and you have family. Everything else can be replaced." Adelaide wanted to believe her. But the memory of the robbery, of the terror as men with bandanas covering their faces had dragged passengers from the coach, still felt too close. "Rest today," Amelia said gently. "Tomorrow you can start at the shop. The railroad's coming, Adelaide. Scottsbluff is growing by the day. We have more orders than we can fill." That evening, lying in a proper bed in Amelia's spare room, Adelaide stared at the ceiling. She was safe, with family, with prospects. She should feel relieved. But her thoughts kept returning to the cabin on the prairie, to the cowboy who had offered shelter with no expectation of return. Matthew Forrester, with his quiet strength and kind eyes. She wondered if she would see him again. A week passed quickly, falling into a rhythm of work that left little time for dwelling on the past. Adelaide proved herself skilled indeed, and Amelia soon had her working on the most complex orders. The customers' wives of merchants, ranchers, and professionals were curious about the cousin from the East, and Adelaide found herself recounting an abbreviated version of her journey many times over. She learned about Scottsbluff from these women's gossip. The town had been little more than a trading post 5 years earlier, but was now a growing community of nearly 700 souls. The promise of the railroad had brought investment and settlers. There was a proper school, 3 churches, 2 doctors, a newspaper, and enough commerce to support Amelia's thriving business. Adelaide also learned more about Matthew Forrester, though she never directly asked. He had come to Nebraska Territory 6 years ago, buying a small ranch north of town. He raised sheep primarily, though he kept cattle too, and was respected for his fair dealings. His wool was considered among the finest in the region. He employed 2 ranch hands and occasionally came to town for supplies, church, or to sell his goods, but largely kept to himself. A confirmed bachelor, Mrs. Thornton had said while being fitted for a new bodice, though not for lack of trying on the part of certain young ladies. The woman had given Adelaide a meaningful look, as if suspecting her interest. On Sunday, Amelia insisted they attend services at the white clapboard church on the edge of town. "Everyone goes," she explained. "It's as much social as spiritual." Adelaide wore a new dress Amelia had helped her make, a modest burgundy calico with a lace collar. They walked the short distance to the church, joining the flow of townspeople in their Sunday best. Inside, the simple sanctuary was nearly full. Amelia led Adelaide to a pew near the middle, nodding greetings to neighbors and customers. Adelaide kept her eyes forward, feeling the weight of curious stares. Just before the service began, there was a slight stir near the entrance. Adelaide turned, along with many others, to see Matthew Forrester slipping into a back pew. He wore a clean dark suit that fit his broad shoulders well, his usually wind-tousled hair neatly combed. He nodded politely to those who acknowledged him, his gaze sweeping the congregation and then stopping when it met Adelaide's. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the church. Adelaide felt her cheeks warm, but she couldn't look away. Matthew gave her a small nod of recognition, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "As I thought," Amelia murmured beside her. "What?" Adelaide whispered, finally breaking the gaze to look at her cousin. "He never comes to church regularly," Amelia said with a knowing smile. "Yet here he is, looking like he stepped out of a catalog." Before Adelaide could respond, the preacher stepped to the pulpit and the service began. Afterward, people lingered on the church steps, exchanging news and pleasantries in the warm May sunshine. Adelaide stood slightly apart, watching children play in the churchyard while Amelia conversed with the preacher's wife, Miss Vargas. She turned to find Matthew standing a respectful distance away, hat in hand. "Mr. Forrester," she replied, suddenly conscious of her heartbeat. "How nice to see you again." "You look well," he said, his eyes taking in her new dress, her hair neatly pinned beneath a small hat. "I trust you're settling in." "Yes, thank you. Amelia has been wonderful. I'm working in her shop now." He nodded, seeming pleased. "Good, that's good." A silence fell between them, not entirely uncomfortable. Adelaide noticed several people watching them with poorly disguised interest. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said finally. "For helping me that night, I never had the chance." "No thanks needed, madam. Nevertheless, you have it." She hesitated, then continued, "Amelia and I would be honored if you would join us for Sunday dinner. It's the least we can offer." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by what might have been pleasure. "That's kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," she assured him. "Please." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "In that case, I accept. Thank you. 1 o'clock. I'll be there." Amelia appeared at Adelaide's side, greeting Matthew warmly. Mr. Forrester, how lovely to see you. Will you be bringing more of that excellent wool soon? The last batch made the finest dresses. Next month, madam. The spring shearing is nearly done. Excellent. Adelaide has just invited you to dinner, I hope. She has, and I've accepted. Wonderful, Emilia beamed. We'll see you at 1 then. As they walked home, Emilia linked arms with Adelaide. That was well done, she said approvingly. It's only proper to thank him, Adelaide protested. Of course, Emilia replied, not bothering to hide her smile. And it's only proper that he couldn't take his eyes off you during the entire service. Emilia, I'm just making observations, dear cousin. Back at the apartment, they busied themselves preparing dinner: a roast chicken with potatoes and early spring vegetables from the market, and an apple pie for dessert. Adelaide found herself checking the clock repeatedly as 1 o'clock approached. Precisely at 1, a knock came at the door. Emilia winked at Adelaide before opening it to reveal Matthew, freshly shaven and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. These were growing by the creek, he said, offering them to Emilia. Not much, but my mother always said never to visit a lady empty-handed. They're lovely, Emilia took them, gesturing him inside, and your mother sounds like a wise woman. Adelaide emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Welcome, Mr. Forrester. His eyes found hers immediately. Miss Vargas. Emilia busied herself putting the flowers in water, leaving them in a moment of silence. Something smells mighty fine, Matthew said at last. Adelaide is an excellent cook, Emilia called from the kitchen. Another talent she brings to Scottsbluff. The meal passed pleasantly. Matthew, though quiet by nature, proved an engaging guest. He spoke of his ranch, of the challenges and rewards of life on the Nebraska prairie. He asked thoughtful questions about Philadelphia and Adelaide's life there, listening intently to her answers. And your family? Emilia asked over pie. You rarely speak of them. A shadow crossed Matthew's face. Not much to tell. Parents passed on years ago. Had a brother, Michael. He died at Gettysburg. I'm sorry, Adelaide said softly. He shrugged, but she could see the old grief in his eyes. War takes many. I was lucky to come home. You fought? Emilia asked. Matthew nodded. Union cavalry. After it ended, I couldn't go back to Pennsylvania. Too many ghosts came west instead. From Pennsylvania, Adelaide leaned forward. Where? Small town near Harrisburg. I grew up outside Philadelphia, she said. Strange to think we might have passed each other on a street there and never known it. His eyes met hers. Fate has curious ways, Miss Vargas. After dinner, Emilia suddenly remembered urgent work in the shop, leaving Adelaide and Matthew alone in the sitting room. Adelaide suspected the ruse but couldn't find it in herself to be truly annoyed. Your cousin is about as subtle as a stampede, Matthew remarked, a smile playing at his lips. Adelaide laughed. She means well. I know. He looked around the comfortable room. You've found a good home here. Thanks to you, he shook his head. You'd have found your way. You strike me as a determined woman, Miss Vargas. Adelaide, she said impulsively. Please call me Adelaide. His expression softened. Adelaide, he repeated as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. Then I'm Matthew. They talked for another hour, more freely now. He told her of his ranch, of his hopes to expand his flock, of the beauty of the prairie in different seasons. She spoke of her parents, of the grief that had propelled her west, of her determination to build a new life. When he finally rose to leave, the sun was low in the sky. Thank you for dinner, he said, standing awkwardly by the door. Best meal I've had in a long while. It was our pleasure, she replied. Truly. He settled his hat on his head. I come to town most Saturdays for supplies, perhaps. Perhaps I might call on you, if that wouldn't be presumptuous. Adelaide felt a warmth spreading through her chest. I'd like that very much. His smile then was different from any she'd seen before, fuller, reaching his eyes, transforming his weathered face. Until Saturday, then. After he'd gone, Emilia reappeared with suspicious promptness. Well, she asked, eyes bright with interest. Adelaide tried to maintain her composure. He's coming to call on Saturday. Emilia clapped her hands in delight. I knew it. Oh, Adelaide, don't give me that look. He's a good man, and you could do far worse in Scottsbluff. It's only a visit, Adelaide protested. Nothing more. But as she helped clean up from dinner, she couldn't stop the smile that kept finding its way to her lips. Saturday seemed both too far away and too close. Adelaide threw herself into work at the shop, learning the business from Amelia and impressing customers with her skilled needlework. She began to feel part of the community as regular patrons greeted her by name and included her in conversation. One customer in particular took a special interest. Mrs. Alina Blackburn, wife of the town's most prominent banker, visited the shop on Wednesday to be fitted for a new walking dress. "Such exquisite stitching," she remarked, examining a sample of Adelaide's work. "Your cousin is fortunate to have acquired your talents." "I'm the fortunate one," Adelaide replied, pinning the fabric carefully. "Nonsense. A young woman of your abilities could do well anywhere." Mrs. Blackburn studied her thoughtfully. "I understand you had quite an ordeal upon arriving here." "Word travels fast," Adelaide said, surprised. "Scottsbluff may be growing, but it's still a small town at heart," the older woman replied with a smile. "I also understand that Matthew Forrester came to your rescue." Adelaide felt her cheeks warm. "He was very kind, indeed." Mrs. Blackburn's eyes gleamed with interest. "And I saw him at church on Sunday, a rare occurrence, and later leaving your cousin's home. He joined us for dinner," Adelaide said, keeping her tone neutral, "to thank him for his help." "How proper," Mrs. Blackburn nodded approvingly. "Matthew is well respected, you know. His ranch may not be the largest, but his methods are progressive. He'll do well when the railroad comes." Adelaide wasn't sure how to respond to this assessment. She continued pinning the hem, conscious of the woman's scrutiny. "My son, James, speaks highly of him," Mrs. Blackburn continued. They served together on the town council. At this, Adelaide looked up. "Mr. Forrester is on the town council for 2 years now. He doesn't say much, but when he does speak, people listen." Mrs. Blackburn adjusted her position to allow Adelaide better access to the hem. "He turned 32 last month, you know. High time he settled down, if you ask me. A man needs a wife, especially out here." Adelaide focused intently on her work, determined not to show how these comments affected her. "I'm sure Mr. Forrester will make that decision when he's ready, madam." Mrs. Blackburn laughed softly. "Perhaps he already has." When Saturday finally arrived, Adelaide found herself checking her appearance in the mirror more often than she cared to admit. She wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, her dark hair arranged in a neat chignon. Amelia watched her fussing with barely concealed amusement. "If you adjust that collar one more time, you'll wear a hole in it." "I just want to look presentable," Adelaide said defensively. "You look beautiful," Amelia assured her, "and nervous, which is charming." Before Adelaide could respond, a knock came at the door. Amelia gave her a quick embrace. "I'll be in the shop if you need me, but you won't need me." Matthew stood on the threshold, hat in hand, looking as nervous as Adelaide felt. He wore a clean shirt under his vest, his boots polished. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "Please come in." She stepped aside. He entered, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something." Surprised, Adelaide accepted it. "You shouldn't have." "Open it," he urged. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with a simple flower design. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the pattern. "I noticed you had none among your things at the cabin," he explained. "Thought you might like to record your new life here." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. "Thank you, Matthew, I shall treasure it," he smiled, relieved. "I thought we might walk if you're agreeable. It's a fine day." They strolled through Scottsbluff, Matthew pointing out buildings and sharing the history of the town. People greeted them as they passed, some with knowing smiles that made Adelaide blush. "You're causing quite a stir being seen with me," Matthew observed wryly. "Am I? Bachelor rancher walking out with the lovely new dressmaker. That's prime gossip for months. Does that bother you?" She asked. He considered this. "No," he said finally. "Does it bother you?" She met his gaze steadily. "Not at all." They walked to the edge of town where the prairie stretched before them, vast and golden in the afternoon sun. A creek meandered through the grassland, cottonwood trees marking its path. "It's beautiful," Adelaide said softly. "Different from the east, but beautiful in its own way." "That's what I thought when I first came," Matthew agreed. "It grows on you, the space, the sky, the freedom of it." They sat on a fallen log near the creek, watching the water flow. Adelaide felt a strange peace in his company, a comfort that belied their short acquaintance. "Tell me about your ranch," she requested. His face lit up as he described his land, his animals, his plans. "I've been experimenting with new breeding methods for the sheep," he explained, "aiming for finer wool. It's starting to pay off." "Is that why Mrs. Blackburn thinks you'll do well when the railroad comes?" He looked surprised. "She said that," Adelaide nodded, "when she came for a fitting." "She mentioned you're on the town council too." Matthew shrugged modestly. "Someone has to look out for the small ranchers' interests. The big cattle operations would run us all out if they could," she also said. Adelaide hesitated, then continued. "She said it was high time you settled down." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the prairie. "Mrs. Blackburn has been trying to match me with suitable young women for years," he said finally. "None took." "Why not?" His eyes returned to her, intent and searching. "Never met anyone who made me want to change my solitary ways." "Until recently." Adelaide's heart quickened. "And now I'm sitting by a creek with a woman who makes me reconsider everything." The directness of his answer stole her breath. In Philadelphia, men spoke in circles and veiled meanings. Matthew Forrester stated his mind plainly. "We barely know each other," she said softly. "That's true," he acknowledged. "But I'd like to change that, if you're willing." She looked at his earnest face, remembering his kindness when she was at her most vulnerable, the respect he'd shown her, the way his rare smile transformed him. "I am," she said simply. Joy flashed across his features. Hesitantly, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they enfolded hers. They sat that way until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, speaking of small things and large, learning the contours of each other's lives. In the weeks that followed, a courtship blossomed. Matthew came to town every Saturday, sometimes with wool or supplies to sell, always finding time to call on Adelaide. They walked together, dined with Amelia, attended church side by side. Occasionally, he would bring small gifts, wildflowers, a ribbon for her hair, fresh honey from his hives. Adelaide found herself thinking of him constantly, looking forward to their meetings with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She had come west seeking a new beginning, not expecting to find her heart engaged so quickly. One warm June evening, Matthew invited her to ride out to his ranch for Sunday dinner after church. "I'd like you to see it properly," he said. "Amelia is welcome too, of course." "I'm sure she'll find a reason to be busy," Adelaide replied with a smile, true to prediction. Amelia declined with a transparent excuse about inventory. "But you go," she insisted. "It's only proper now that everyone knows you're courting." The ranch looked different in full daylight than it had on that first desperate night. The cabin, though small, was well maintained, with a veranda that caught the afternoon breeze. Garden beds bordered with stones held vegetables and herbs. The barn was larger than Adelaide had remembered, as was the corral where several horses now grazed alongside a milk cow. "It's not much," Matthew said, helping her down from Daisy's back, "but it's mine, free and clear." "It's wonderful," she said sincerely. He showed her around the property with obvious pride. Behind the cabin, sheep grazed on rolling pasture, their wool thick and healthy. 2 dogs kept watch over the flock, barely glancing at the visitors. "Border collies," Matthew explained, "worth their weight in gold. Better than any hired hand for herding." Inside the cabin, Matthew had clearly made an effort. The table was set with what appeared to be his best dishes, and wildflowers brightened the center. The meal he prepared was simple but good: roast beef, potatoes, and greens from his garden. "You cook well for a bachelor," Adelaide observed. "Necessity," he replied. Though I'll admit this is my finest effort. Usually it's beans and bacon." After dinner, they sat on the veranda, watching the sun set over the prairie. The vastness of the landscape still awed Adelaide, the endless sky, the sweep of grassland, the profound silence broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk or bleat of a sheep. "You miss the city?" Matthew asked quietly. She considered the question. "Sometimes. The theaters, the shops, the bustle of it. But there's something here that Philadelphia didn't have." "What's that?" She turned to him. "Possibility, room to breathe, to grow, to become something new." His eyes held hers. "And is that what you want, to become something new?" "I already am," she admitted. "The Adelaide who arrived on that stagecoach isn't the same woman sitting here now." "I wish I'd known her too," he said, "but I'm mighty fond of the woman you are today." The simple declaration warmed her. In the fading light, she studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crinkles at the corner of his eye, the quiet strength in his bearing. "Matthew," she said softly, "why did you help me that night, truly?" He was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "I was riding the creek line, checking for breaks in the fence," he began. "Saw something under the bridge, thought it might be a wounded animal at first, then I realized it was a person." He paused. "When I saw you there, alone and afraid, it wasn't a choice, Adelaide. No decent man could have left you there." "Many would have," she said, "or worse." "Not a decent man," he repeated firmly, "and bringing me here, giving me your bed, feeding me, asking nothing in return." He turned to face her fully. "My mother raised me better than that, and—" He hesitated, then continued. "From the moment I saw your face in the shadows, something in me knew you were important. I couldn't have said how or why, just knew." The honesty of his answer moved her deeply. Without thinking, she reached out to touch his cheek. "I'm glad it was you who found me." His hand came up to cover hers, warm and strong. "Adelaide," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've never been much for flowery words, but I need you to know I'm falling in love with you, have been since that first night." Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Matthew." "You don't need to say anything," he said quickly. "It's too soon, I know that, but I wanted it said honest and plain." Adelaide leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a gentle kiss that spoke what words could not. When she drew back, his expression was one of wonder. "That was worth waiting 32 years for," he whispered. She laughed softly. "Now who's being flowery?" He smiled, then grew serious again. "I want to court you properly, Adelaide, no rushing, I want you to be sure." "And if I already am?" she asked. "Then I'm the luckiest man in Nebraska Territory," he replied. "But still, we'll take our time, do things right." As twilight deepened into night, they sat together on the veranda, talking of the future, of possibilities, of hope. When Matthew finally rode her back to town, the stars overhead seemed to mirror the brightness Adelaide felt within. Summer flowed into autumn, and their courtship deepened. Adelaide's work at the dress shop flourished, her designs bringing new customers eager for Eastern fashion with practical Western sensibility. Matthew's wool business expanded, his breeding program yielding finer fleeces that commanded premium prices. They fell into a rhythm. Matthew in town on Saturdays, church together on Sundays, occasional rides to the ranch or picnics by the creek. They learned each other's histories, dreams, flaws, and strengths. Adelaide discovered Matthew's quiet humor, his passion for books, his occasional stubborn streak. He came to understand her determination, her creativity, her moments of homesickness for the East. "You could go back," he said one evening as they walked along the creek where he had first brought her after their meeting at the bridge, "if you miss it." "There's nothing for me there now," she replied. "My life is here." The look he gave her was full of hope. "With the dress shop." She met his gaze steadily. "With you, Matthew, if you'll have me." The next day, he visited Amelia's shop with unusual formality, asking for a private word. When they emerged from the back room, Amelia was beaming, and Matthew looked both terrified and elated. "Adelaide," he called across the shop, heedless of the customers browsing fabrics. "Will you walk with me?" Outside, the October air was crisp, trees along the main street turning gold and crimson. Matthew led her to the small town square where a bench sat beneath an old oak. He seemed nervous, his usual composure replaced by a restless energy. "What did you and Amelia discuss?" Adelaide asked, though she suspected the answer. "I asked for her blessing," he replied, his voice tight. "As your only family here," and she gave it, enthusiastically. He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket. "Adelaide, I'm not a wealthy man. My ranch is modest, my house small, but everything I have is honest earned, and I can promise you'll never want for necessities." Her heart began to race as he knelt before her on the ground, uncaring of the curious glances from passers-by. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you since I found you under that bridge, though I didn't know it then. I want to spend my life with you, to build something lasting together." He opened his hand to reveal a slender gold ring with a small pearl. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Adelaide Vargas, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she looked at this man who had saved her in more ways than he knew. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Matthew, I will marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the pearl gleaming in the autumn sunlight. When he stood and took her in his arms, a smattering of applause broke out from onlookers. "Well, that'll be all over town by supper time," Matthew said with a chuckle. "Good," Adelaide replied. "Let them talk." The wedding was set for December, a date that raised eyebrows among the more traditional townsfolk. "People will talk if we marry so quickly," Adelaide warned. "Let them," Matthew said firmly. "We know the truth of our hearts." Amelia was practically giddy with excitement, insisting on creating Adelaide's wedding dress herself. "The finest bride Scottsbluff has ever seen," she declared. As the date approached, Matthew worked feverishly to prepare the cabin for his bride. He added a second bedroom, expanded the kitchen, and built new furniture with his own hands. Adelaide visited weekly to offer suggestions and watch the transformation of the bachelor rancher's home into a place for two. On one such visit, a month before the wedding, Matthew showed her a newly planted garden. "Apple trees," he explained, pointing to the saplings, "and cherry and plum. They'll take years to bear properly, but I want to plant them now, for our future." The simple gesture moved her deeply. "Our children will climb those trees someday," she said softly. He looked at her, love plain on his face. "I hope so. You'll be a wonderful father," she told him. "And you, a wonderful mother." He took her hands in his. "Adelaide, I want you to know I never expected this happiness. After the war, after losing Michael, I thought I'd live my days alone. You've given me a second chance at life." She kissed him then, beneath the bare branches of their future orchard, sealing their promise with more than words. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the ground frosted like sugar. Adelaide stood in Amelia's apartment, trembling slightly as her cousin fastened the last buttons on her dress, ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, simple yet elegant. "You look like an angel," Amelia said, tears in her eyes. "I wish your parents could see you." "They know," Adelaide said softly, touching the small locket at her throat that contained their miniature portraits. The church was filled to capacity not just with friends, but with what seemed like the entire population of Scottsbluff. News of the romance between the Eastern dressmaker and the solitary rancher had captured the town's imagination. Even the newspaper editor was present, promising a full account in the next edition. But Adelaide saw none of them as she walked down the aisle on the arm of Amelia's husband, Thomas. Her eyes were fixed on Matthew, standing tall and straight at the altar, wearing a new suit and an expression of absolute wonder. Their vows were simple, traditional, spoken with clear voices that carried to the rafters. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Matthew's kiss was gentle yet fervent, a promise of the life to come. The reception was held at the town's small hotel, where well-wishers crowded around to congratulate the newlyweds. Mrs. Blackburn was particularly effusive. "I knew it from the moment I saw you together," she declared. A perfect match, and such a romantic story rescued from beneath a bridge, just like a novel. Adelaide exchanged an amused glance with her new husband. Their true story was indeed worthy of a novel, but not for the reasons the gossips imagined. As evening fell, Matthew helped his bride into the wagon he had decorated with evergreen boughs and ribbons. They would spend their wedding night at the ranch, their home now. "Ready, Mrs. Forrester?" he asked, his voice warm with promise. Adelaide felt the name settle around her like a comfortable shawl. "I've been ready since the moment you found me, Mr. Forrester." They rode through the winter twilight, the stars emerging one by one above the prairie. At the ranch, Matthew lifted Adelaide from the wagon and carried her across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. The cabin was transformed, a cheerful fire blazed in the hearth, candles illuminated the fresh paint and new curtains, and vases of winter greenery brightened every surface. But most striking was the feeling that pervaded the space of welcome, of home, of new beginnings. "Welcome home, Adelaide," Matthew said softly. That night, they became truly husband and wife, their union tender and passionate, built on the foundation of trust they had established over the months. Afterward, lying in each other's arms in the bed they now shared, Adelaide felt a deep contentment unlike anything she had known. "Happy?" Matthew asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Beyond words," she replied. "And you?" He pulled her closer. "I never thought I could be this happy." In the weeks that followed, they settled into married life with remarkable ease. Adelaide continued working at the dress shop 3 days a week, while helping with the ranch on other days. She learned to card wool, tend the garden, and even assist with lambing when spring came. Matthew marveled at her adaptability, her willingness to embrace ranch life without complaint. "City girls aren't supposed to take to the prairie so easily," he teased one evening as they sat by the fire, Adelaide mending his shirts. "I'm not most city girls," she reminded him, "and this isn't just the prairie, it's our home." Spring brought new life to the ranch lambs in the pasture, shoots in the garden, buds on their young orchard trees. It also brought news that filled the Forresters with joy and trepidation. Adelaide was expecting a child. "A baby," Matthew whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby, due in November," Adelaide said, watching his face carefully, his eyes filled with tears. "Best harvest we could hope for." The pregnancy progressed well through the summer, Adelaide's slender frame gradually rounding with new life. She continued working at the shop until her condition became obvious, then reluctantly reduced her hours at Amelia's insistence. "The baby needs rest, even if you don't," her cousin scolded. "And so do those swollen ankles." At home, Matthew was tenderness itself, taking on extra chores, hiring an additional hand to help with the more strenuous ranch work. Each night, he would read aloud to Adelaide and the growing child within her poetry, novels, even stories he composed himself about life on the prairie. "Our child will know words as well as wool," Adelaide remarked. "And thread too," Matthew added. "With such a talented mother." The baby arrived on a cold November night after a labor that left Matthew pacing outside the bedroom while Amelia and the midwife attended Adelaide. The sound of her pain nearly undid him, but when a new cry joined the night strong and indignant, he fell to his knees in gratitude. "Mr. Forrester," the midwife called. "Come meet your son." Matthew entered the bedroom to find Adelaide propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He has your eyes," she whispered. The baby was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and indeed, eyes that already seemed to hold the same steady gaze as his father's. Matthew reached out a trembling hand to touch his son's cheek. "Hello, little one," he said, voice choked with emotion. "Welcome to the world." They named him Michael Thomas Forrester, honoring both Matthew's fallen brother and Amelia's husband who had been so supportive of their union. "Michael," Adelaide said softly, watching her husband hold their son. He would be proud to share his name. He would have loved being an uncle, Matthew agreed, and he would have loved you, Adelaide. Life settled into a new rhythm with baby Michael at its center. Adelaide discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed, navigating the demands of motherhood with the same determination she'd shown in rebuilding her life. Matthew proved an attentive father, often carrying Michael in a sling as he did his less dangerous ranch chores. "The sheep don't mind another Forrester watching over them," he told Adelaide with a grin. The years passed with the cycle of seasons on the prairie. The railroad came to Scottsbluff as predicted, bringing growth and prosperity. Matthew's breeding program gained recognition beyond Nebraska Territory, bringing buyers from as far as Chicago and St. Louis. Adelaide eventually opened a second dress shop in the growing town, specializing in fine woolens from her husband's ranch, a partnership that symbolized their union. Michael grew into a sturdy boy with his father's calm nature and his mother's quick mind. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Emma Rose, whose arrival coincided with the first blossoms on their orchard trees. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Matthew took Adelaide to the bridge where he had found her that fateful night. "It looks smaller now," she observed, peering at the wooden structure spanning the creek. "But no less important," he replied. "Everything we have began here." Adelaide leaned against him, watching the water flow beneath the bridge, carrying leaves and twigs toward some distant destination. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden by that night?" she asked. Matthew was quiet for a moment. "I believe some things are meant to be, Adelaide, if not that night, perhaps another. Our paths were meant to cross." She smiled up at him. "For a man who claims not to be flowery with words, you have your moments, Matthew Forrester." He laughed, the sound echoing across the prairie they both now called home. "Only with you, my love, only ever with you." As they rode back to their ranch, larger now, with a proper farmhouse built alongside the original cabin, the sheep pastures expanded, the orchard beginning to bear fruit. Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The tragedy that had sent her west, the terror of the robbery, the desperation beneath the bridge, all had led to this life of love and purpose. "Happy?" Matthew asked, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding night. Adelaide looked at their home, where their children waited with Amelia and Thomas, where the life they had built together flourished in the Nebraska soil. She thought of the bridge, the fire that had awaited her at Matthew's place that night, the warmth she had found in his heart. "Beyond measure," she replied, "beyond words." And as the sun set over their land, painting the prairie gold and crimson, Adelaide Forrester knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just shelter, but her true home in this place, and in the arms of the man who had found her when she was most lost.